Nick, 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 Nick. Kick it.
Hello, Nickelodeon fans, and welcome to This Week in Nickelodeon History. We are covering every single show that either premiered or ended between May 23rd and May 29th. And this is an interesting one because this has happened only a handful of times, but we actually have a This Week in Nickelodeon History where history will be made, because this year on May 27th, 2021, the reboot of the Rugrats will be premiering on Paramount Plus. Never did I think that this would happen. I really thought that when Nickelodeon was going back into their catalog of shows to see what they could make into movies and even possibly revive, I honestly thought we saw enough of the Rugrats. We had 9 seasons of the show. We had 3 theatrical movies, a multitude of video games. I thought, a spin-off series with its own longevity on television, 2 straight-to-DVD films. I mean, there's a lot of Rugrats content out there, and I thought, if anything, they would do a special. I didn't think there was going to be a full-on revival. And if we go back to when they were announcing everything of the Rugrats, this wasn't just going to be a revival of the original cartoon. This was going to be also a live-action CGI hybrid film for Paramount. I imagine that if they went forward with that movie, of course, its original release date we've already passed, I believe, but if that would have just kind of, even if it's still, I don't know if it's outright canceled. I think it's on the shelf, but if they are continuing that project, that is all but certain to be a Paramount Plus exclusive film. I don't see any reason to release that in theaters. And just the sound of it, the live action CGI, I mean, what are we talking about here? Just are all the characters CGI, but we're just going to make the backgrounds look live action? We're going to go for that kind of aesthetic. Are we going to have real Stu and Dee Dee with CGI babies? And for anyone listening, that project is, as far as I know, still not happening. But we have this reboot here, which the more content I see of it, the more I become intrigued. But at the same time, there are obvious bothers that I'm going to have with it. But I'm very open-minded and actually excited for Thursday to watch whatever drops and to see how the show turns out after all this time. I'm excited that the original cast is back. Their voices will always be ever connected with those characters. It is a real shame that the parents did not get the same respect in this regard. Beyond just the money they could have saved by just bringing back as much of the original adult cast as they could have, you would have just not ran into this issue that didn't need to be changed. But there's been some more content released of some of the voices of the new parents, and I have been impressed thus far with how closely they're trying to match the original voices, but at the same time, that just goes back to the original argument of why not get everybody back in the first place. But aesthetically, I'm starting to like the show, the style they're going for, and we'll see how it turns out on Thursday. I'm probably going to record a special review that I'll just drop as a bonus podcast if you're an audio listener, and a bonus video with extra video production put into if you follow us on YouTube or Facebook. So that is very interesting. Last year, on May 23rd, 2020, the show Group Chat with Jaden and Brent premiered on Nickelodeon. This was a very early attempt in the pandemic of 2020 to get content on television. It was weird. We weren't supposed to really be around with one another, but everybody's at home needing entertainment, needing content to keep them busy, if they were not working. Or for even kids. I mean, kids need to be entertained and whatnot. So Nickelodeon on May 6th 2020 announced that it was greenlit, and it's basically like it with the name group chat. It's basically everybody in their own space, like you're watching a Zoom call with characters, I imagine. It is still ongoing at this point. It's 2 seasons deep with 15 episodes. So, good for them. Good for them to find something, to find some way to get some kind of content out during that time. 3 years ago, on May 25th, 2018, we saw the final episode of The Thundermans. The Thundermans was created by Jed Spingarn and is about a family of superheroes. Think, if you took the concept of The Incredibles, but you made it in a sitcom setting for Nickelodeon. That's pretty much what I got out of it. Although there are some differences here. It mainly follows the kids in this regard, obviously being a Nickelodeon show, with Kira Kosarin as Phoebe Thunderman and Jack Griffo as Max Thunderman. Max actually is yearning to be a supervillain, and that's just where some of the dynamics come into. He's trying to be evil, and the rest of the family's trying to be good. And what's surprising is that this had such longevity alongside Henry Danger on Nickelodeon. You had these 2 superhero sitcom shows running at the same time concurrently. There was a crossover episode between the 2, and they both ran pretty successfui. And in some ways, I like a little bit of the Thundermans more than I did Henry Danger. I don't know why. Actually, I don't know what I'm talking about. I know exactly why I liked it. I am a massive fan of the character Dr. Colosso, voiced by Master Shake himself, Dana Schneider. Huge fan of his. So anytime I would have to hear his voice, it's one of the soothing voices I can think of out there. But so yeah, that was the Thundermans. 5 years ago, on May 30th, 2016, we saw the end of Lost in the West. And if you haven't heard of Lost in the West, well, then you should know that it also debuted 5 years ago on the same week, on May 28th, 2016. This was a 3-part comedy western miniseries that aired on Nickelodeon. It was directed by Carlos Gonzalez. And it ran 3 nights in a row, each episode running about 45 minutes each. 2 stepbrothers accidentally invent a time machine and are transported from the present day to 1885, where they come into conflict with the local mayor. Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, over the years, I've really appreciated Back to the Future Part 3 a lot more than I did when I was younger. Because when I was a kid, I was way more interested in Part 2 with all of the future gadgets, and the past seemed so boring. When I grew up and watched it again, well, I became more impressed with Doc Brown to be able to still be as scientific as he could in the past that he was in the future. So I have not seen this miniseries whatsoever, but it sounds fairly interesting. I would say if you can, if it's on any platform or anything like that, it's probably well worth a shot. I mean, it's just 3 episodes. You don't have to go too deep into it. 8 years ago, on May 27th, 2013, the Nickelodeon movie Nicky Deuce aired on Nickelodeon. The movie, starring Noah Munich, who is best known as Gibby on iCarly, and God bless him for it. I absolutely love Noah. I'm a massive fan of his. I love the character of Gibby, and I've seen a few of his other projects, and they've generally made me laugh. So I've never seen this movie, but just by the name and who's starring in it, I'm willing to give it a shot. So if you've seen it, then you know what, send me a message. Let me know if it's good or not, if it's worth digging up or anything like that. 8 years ago, on May 25th, 2013, one of my guilty pleasure Nicktoons, Sanjay and Craig, premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by Jim Dershberger, Jay Howell, and Andreas Trolf, Sanjay and Craig follows a young boy and his friend, a pet snake, and their shenanigans around town. It had a lot of character to it. It did not care to hide its fart joke humor, its immaturity, and I kind of liked it. It was one of the rare times that I really got into a Nicktoon when I was older. I can't tell you how I started watching the show, but I know I started watching it at some point when it was on Nicktoons Network. I may have just thrown it on the TV as background noise and just got enthralled really because of Chris Hardwick being a part of the show. I was a massive fan of the Nerdist podcast at the time, and I just loved Chris Hardwick's voice, and hearing that in the background, it got my attention. Of course, Sanjay being a 12-year-old Indian American boy, Craig being a anthropomorphic pet snake who he met in a pet store, have their goofball adventures throughout town. It's a show that is kind of a hit or miss with some people these days. Some people are really turned off by the very juvenile humor of the show, and others enjoy it. And honestly, for Nickelodeon, I mean, this show really gave me Rocko's Modern Life type vibes. They were not afraid of maybe trying to be a little bit more adult with their humor than other shows at the time. Hey, look, good fart jokes, I'm here for it. You can't be a fan of Nickelodeon and not say that there isn't a good fart joke here or there. I mean, it feels wrong. So I don't know if you passed on it before. Maybe it was just an episode you watched or something. I have nothing else to say. But this is an absolute like I said, guilty pleasure of mine. It's not my top greatest Nicktoons of all time, but it's one that I think stood out against the pack, especially at the time that it premiered on Nickelodeon. 9 years ago, on May 28th, 2012, the Nickelodeon film Rags premiered on Nickelodeon. It is a musical gender-switched inversion and modernization of the Cinderella fairy tale, starring Keke Palmer, Max Schneider, Drake Bell, Avon Jogia, and Nick Cannon. This is just another movie I have never seen before. It seemed to have done well in the ratings for Nickelodeon and was released on a soundtrack that at its peak hit number 1 on iTunes soundtrack albums charts and number 3 on the top 100 album charts. So there's different ways to gauge success, especially with a multimedia project like this, because not only does it get released as a movie, but it has a soundtrack. And some people may only ever listen to the soundtrack, and there's some people who will only ever watch the movie. So, seem to have done well for themselves. 11 years ago, on May 24th, 2010, Dragon Ball Z Kai premiered on Nicktoons Network, or better known as Dragon Ball Kai. It is the easiest way to get into the Dragon Ball universe, if you will. Not to go on super long, because even though this is a outside Nickelodeon property, it was pretty cool that Kai got to premiere on Nicktoons Network. It was like it came out of left field. It of course would eventually run on Toonami, but what Dragon Ball Kai is they re-edited Dragon Ball Z down from 291 episodes to 167. They took out all of the filler and at the same time converted the picture from a 4:3 aspect ratio to a 16:9 aspect ratio so that it would look, moderately better on a widescreen screen. But if you're an anime purist, you sometimes would rather have the 4:3 aspect ratio. So sometimes you gotta, think to yourself if you'd rather have the original aspect ratio if you're fine with a cropped picture. But either way, this took down the amount of episodes it would take to get through the entire show significantly. I mean, it's still 167, but let me tell you, getting through that show is an absolute breeze. It's not an issue whatsoever. So if you've ever had an inkling to get into Dragon Ball, Kai is the way to go, in my opinion. If you become a fan off of Kai, then I would say go be a nerd and go watch from the original, the best, go get the Dragon boxes and get the best picture quality you can get of those original episodes and watch the entire series. But if you want the short form abridged version, then you go with Dragon Ball Kai here. 12 years ago, on May 23rd, 2009, Mr. Meaty finished its run. Another guilty pleasure Nickelodeon show of mine. I like Mr. Meaty. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is. Yeah, some crude humor can go a long way with me. I enjoy it, but I'm not like somebody who's just going to laugh at the sound of a fart. There's got to be some sort of funny setup for it. And there was just some episodes of Mr. Meaty that had a joke that legitimately made me laugh. And when this came out, I was, 14, 15 years old. I was starting to mature in my humor a little bit, but they were still able to get some sort of childish humor out of me. And its first episode, Buffalo Burrito, is a great episode. Wedgelore is another one I can think of. Moochmaster P is a notorious one, but to me is still really funny. And Parker's Date, Josh Off. There's just a lot of great episodes of this show. It's really bizarre. If you've never seen it, it is basically a puppet show within a food court, and it's just it wants to just kind of shock you with what they're gonna do with these kind of puppets and the stories they're gonna tell. It's silly, it's immature. I'll warn you ahead of time, but it's something I don't know. I enjoy. I had a Mr. Meaty shirt in high school. I was able to find one on the Nick shop and bought it, and it was just a brown shirt that had Josh and Parker in the middle with the Mr. Meaty logo. It said, "Where friends meet to eat meat," and on the back it had the Mr. Meaty logo. And I don't know where that shirt is right now, but I definitely never got rid of it, so it's got to be somewhere in my storage. But I need to frame that shirt. That is a cool shirt. I'm glad I had a Mr. Meaty shirt. I wish there was still something of that available, but to say the least, it lived in my heart, and I hope there's someone out there listening who also can enjoy a little Mr. Meaty in theirs as well. 16 years ago, on May 27th, 2005, we saw the final episode of You Pick Live. You Pick Live was a weekday afternoon show that Nickelodeon hosted from the Nickelodeon headquarters in Times Square, and once in a while would go into other various parts of the world to host the show. I specifically remember a time that they were also in front of the Nickelodeon studios down in Orlando, Florida. There was definitely a time they were down there too, but it was essentially just a show to connect the shows you were watching. It was the show that you would go to in between commercials or when shows would end, and they would just have various sketches and gags and a studio audience, and sometimes celebrities would come on. It was an extremely fun time. This is where Pick-Boy came into play, and this is where I felt I had my crush on Candace Bailey, and then she showed up in G4 years later. Absolutely crazy. The show was starring Brent Poppolizo and Candace Bailey. Of course, Jeff Sutphin would come in as Pick-Boy once in a while, and definitely had a longevity long after You Pick Live, and I believe still to this day shows up on Nickelodeon content. I know there was things like that, but I wanted to give You Pick Live a shout out. And did I get his name right? Brent Poppolizo. If I didn't say it right the first time, I definitely said it right there. Look, I remember Candace Bailey. That's right. I'm still a fan. Where is she? Hopefully she comes back to the new G4. But last but not least here, we have this really weird this week in Nickelodeon history, because I know when this show starts, therefore I know how long it's been on. 33 years ago, in 1988, we have this show called Don't Just Sit There. And there's no start date for this, although the original source when I found this stated that it started at some point in May. And the only summary I have of this show is from IMDb, and this person, Anonymous, wrote, "Teenage targeted talk comedy show that ran on Nickelodeon through 1989 and introduced future stars as guests like Mayim Bialik and New Kids on the Block. Something like a young version of the late night shows, complete with a house band." That was from Anonymous. Thank you. So, there's not much about this show. There was a survival guide released for it, and that's like the only picture that even IMDb has of this show is just their book. I can read Matt Brown, Veronica Alessino was on 2 episodes of the show. I don't know if it lasted. It went it seemingly went past at least one episode, but the most I can see is 3 episodes of the executive producer, Jeffrey Darby, having this from 1988 to 1989. So I don't know if they were just trying to get something off the pilot and it was going somewhere and then it didn't. I have no idea, but... And now, an update on training for Legends of the Hidden Temple. So we are on week 3 of training for Legends of the Hidden Temple, the rebooted version coming to the CW at some point this year. I have already registered to try to be a contestant on the show, and regardless on if I get on, I am training for July as if I am going to be on. So my weight loss journey by week 2 really didn't go anywhere. I didn't jump into the deep end on this. I really wanted to start small and build my way up because I really wanted to wean my body off of certain things I was usually ingesting, like sugars and whatnot. So I wanted to kind of, flush my body out. During week 2, I really started this week increasing my endurance for cardio. So I started working to walking a bit more every day. I'm actually on a vacation this week from work, and when I go back to work, I'm actually going to just start walking to work because I am within walking distance of my job, so I'll just save a ton of money on gas. Therefore, my cardio will also go up, and I'll have more money in the bank and what have you. So, but since last week, where I still was at 319.6, I've actually lost a little bit. I am at 317.9. So that is the journey so far. Seeing a pound or anything off, like that's already a high. You got to see that and just keep that momentum going forward. And when you just see it go down a little bit, that's where it's like, okay, things are working. Even if it's minimal, you have to take baby steps with this. You can't just go super hardcore into working out and losing weight and eating right and then expect like massive results within, 3 weeks. I've done a lot of damage to this body that I have to now undo in a short amount of time. So I'm continually moving forward with this, and I appreciate if this helps you in any way or kickstarts you into wanting to work out. Hey, join me on this little process. You guys are my accountability on this, so I really appreciate it. That is this week in Nickelodeon history. Just thank you for joining me. I really appreciate all of you. If you are a listener of this podcast on any means necessary, if you are a fan, thank you from the bottom of my heart. The best way you can help out this show is to let other fans know that this exists. So if you can share it on any means necessary, Twitter, Facebook, and a group on Facebook about Nickelodeon, what have you. If you can review us on iTunes, that always helps with like having the people find the show who need to see it. And subscribe to us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on all forms of social media at I'm Ready Podcast on Twitter, at SpongeBob Podcast on Instagram. And if you have any questions you would ever like me to read out on the show or any comments you would like me to read out on the show, you can email me at snailmail@euphonics.com, UFONYX.com. So this is Eric signing off for this week in Nickelodeon history.
On the Lord Hut, here a hut, Nick. On the Lord Hut, here a hut, Nick. On the Ricky Ticky Low, while living #1 Nickelodeon.